There's Yeah, Jason has a question. If the TMS is powered as well, or does it get pulled along passively by the ROV tether? No, there are some propulsion, but mainly it just gets uh, towed around by the ship because the end of that long cable. So when the ship moves, ROV the TMS moves along with it, but there is some propulsion on the TMS. Yep. There's a lot of waiting for things to happen with the. Okay. ROV, this is the computer lab. Looks like we've lost live streaming. Roger, thank you. Is that video's on? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, somebody said they just. This from the ship. We've never had the capabilities to do it, but the new upgrade is just incredible. I'm really impressed with it. Oh, yeah, yeah. Everything seems to be working. I've not heard of any problems. I can tell you right now, there's too many. I can't keep track of them all. Yeah, they're. I keep looking. to my right because there's a large high definition output so that we can see. And that's how we're going to communicate um, with the operators of um, the people who are driving the ROV. When we want to pick something up, we'll describe what we want from here to maintain social distancing. Behind me, let's see, one, two, three, four, five, six. There's a dozen monitors behind me that have all kinds of information. Um, they include location of the ship, meteorology, what kind of wind speed and wind direction, as well as the depth of the seafloor and information about um, where the RV is and where the TMS is, how much we're pitching or rolling, and uh, and also the winch, how much tension is on the winch. The bottom screens, the larger ones, let me get out of your way a little bit and adjust it. Those are also information about what the ROV is seeing. Um, there's one that gives specific information about. And I think you can see the green bar bouncing up and down, perhaps. That's me talking. And it's the live feed that's going out. It's an amazing operation. I'm not going to show you all the wires that it takes to keep things together because Trevor, our marine tech, doesn't like how messy they are. But he hasn't had time to clean them up. Oh, there. Okay. Apparently, they're Jeff. You want to answer that one? Here.
Hey guys. So I see a question in the chat. Did Brian already? Sorry, I'm back. Brian and I are taking shifts eating lunch. Is what's happening. Um, so did he answer about the captain and the course of the vehicle or the vessel? No? Okay. So it's actually a real coordinated dance. sideways in the ocean. So the guys on the bridge can basically just pinpoint, yes, we want to move literally 50 feet in one direction, punch in a button, and the computer software takes over, and the ship will just move towards that new point. And that's what's really needed to do ROV operations, because the ship has to be very precisely placed above the ROV at all times. You guys can see for us, unfortunately. But hopefully we'll get back to the seafloor soon. I, I'm sorry, Bridget. You were kind of staccato there. Our Thank you guys all for being guinea pigs with this telebresence thing. It's actually working fairly well, believe it or not, but we're just not practiced in its use. What can you ask your question again? Okay. Let me see if I can fix the live feed. So the guys are saying on the shore. You got it. Okay, they got it. It's back. Yeah. Oh, just showing that you can have tech problems anywhere in the world, right? Not just at sea. You don't like my Darth Vader voice, Kanisa? Uh, yep. It and it gets the ship is immediately pulling, and then you kind of enter this sort of sweet zone where then it gets you've got a good amount of wire, and then when you get really really deep, then it gets really laggy. Like the ship moves, but then you don't see it in the wire for like 10 minutes because there's so much line between the vehicle on the bottom and the ship. So it's but these guys, they do a pretty good job with it. I see another question. Elizabeth asked about my career and becoming a chief scientist. Um, so, uh, my career, in a nutshell, I knew from a very early age I wanted to be a marine biologist. I didn't really know what that was. I just knew I loved the ocean. Um, and I did an undergraduate degree in marine science and biology. And then there I learned what graduate school was, and that if I wanted to be a scientist, I probably should go to graduate school. Um, got first introduced to the deep sea by a couple of my college professors, and that was really exciting. I had known nothing about the deep sea before that, and I couldn't believe that there was such a vast area of the ocean that we knew so little about. And I decided that's really what I wanted to work on. So I did that in graduate school, and I studied the feeding ecology of deep sea fishes and worked on the abyssal plain there. And I had an advisor who was a master of going to sea. His name is Dr. Ken Smith, and he's actually at a research institute called Mbari now. And so I went to sea a lot. Kanisa actually went to sea with us as well at one point. And and that's sort of where I learned about how you go to sea was from him. And then as I moved into a faculty position and had projects of my own, then that's when you get to become the chief scientist. You are in charge of the project, and you've got to determine what the goals of are going to be at sea, and how you're going to partition the time to get all of the sampling objectives completed, and make up the schedules and all of the rest of that. Work with the captain and the technicians and all the other scientists and crew. So it's I really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun being able to sort of direct what you're going to focus on next when you're out at sea. It can be a little stressful when you have a hurricane headed at you, but yeah, it's good. I'm looking at the video right now. The Can you guys see that the? Okay, wanted to make sure all the feeds were still working. Oh, and one other thing I will say is take high school students out with us here. But if you want to go out regularly to sea, going technician, like Trevor, you guys met Trevor, that's another way. He has a degree actually from UH in global environmental science, and had a real interest in technology and things of that nature. And so he's an ocean going technician. Um, and then our crew, they either go to the Maritime Academy, one of the Maritime Academies, and learn how to be a professional seagoing person. And some of them actually just kind of fall into it through some other routes, just getting opportunities out on boats and learning their way around, driving and maintaining and operating the ship and equipment at sea. So there's many different ways to do this. Okay, and there's a question from Jason. Do you choose all the people who come on the cruise? I choose the scientists who come on the cruise. The crew is chosen by the Marine Center and the captain. The Marine Center, they provide the ocean-going technicians, and that pool of people is set by those guys. So, and for most of the trips that I have been on, if I'm the chief scientist, I choose the other scientists. Some agencies will realize that more than one project could have their sampling done on the same cruise, and then you pool your resources, and sometimes you have multiple science parties that join together. That gets much more complicated, but it can be really productive when you have multiple science groups from different places going along. So hydrothermal vent research is a classic example of where that's done a lot. So another question, for every day out at sea, how many days of prep work happen on land? A lot. For short cruises, it's easily 1-to-1, maybe even a little bit more sometimes. So a 10-day cruise, and then if you're out at sea longer, then of course that ratio changes. So in February, I have a 45-day cruise. We're already in the planning phases. We've been in the planning phases for a month, but I'll spend a few hours a week on that as we build up to the February 45-dayer. So it'll probably end up being 1-to-1 as well, maybe a little less. Did I forget anything? Yeah, I forgot my pocket knife. Yeah, you always forget something. There is always one little thing or another. But if you've really prepared well, and we have checklists, we have packing lists, and you know which. What was for lunch? Beef curry, chicken veal. What's happening, Megan? What's happening?
So what we had to do was
This is Megan, if you haven't met Megan. Megan is part of the ROV team and also the video annotation lab at UH. So,
hi everyone. So you'll notice I pulled off the bottom and because tether in the ROV and the TMS, and as we went down, that tether compressed, made it really loose on our casting, and so the tether was jumping and swirling. We had to go up in the water column and please pull that tether, and then we back up. So right now we have it
Yep. This is a test dive. You never know what's going to happen.
Getting caught on any private jet, having trouble later on during that dive.
So you guys are in the process of actually retracting it right now?
Yeah, it has been fully retracted, and pilots take it down.
Great. Yes, this is a common thing that happens when you put on a new tether between the two pieces. This is not unusual. It's not a real great surprise.
Okay.
I'll be back in a minute, guys.
to love. Ready to do some power.
So what they're doing right now is the ballasting. Those brownish bags are filled with metal shot, which easily rusts away on the seafloor. And those are just actually cotton hand towels, so they're not synthetic, and also will just rot away on the seafloor. Um, and they weigh about 5 pounds apiece, and they're just going to pick them up and drop them off. So those ballast pouches, they'll pick them up and they'll drop them off until they reach about neutral, just slightly negative buoyancy. So that basket actually is going back in because they're going to test the buoyancy, but those objects on the right-hand side with those little handles that come up and look like a T, those are the cores, the push cores for collecting mud. And then on the left-hand side of that basket was a box for putting in, well, probably on this dive, just rocks, coffee cups, or something like that. That's normally what we would have animals in. So the mud cloud you see being kicked up right now, they're pushing up with thrusters to
resolution, another larger. One of these with or something. Well,
yeah, we saw it. Yeah. Yeah. We saw it on the HD. We didn't think to look at the other. Yeah. Yeah. There's a little bit of a chat or a little bit of dialogue about scuba diving in the chat right now about whether it's a good idea to get scuba certified if you're interested in marine biology. Um, I always recommend getting scuba certified because it's just a really fun thing to do. Uh, but I have a very memorable experience with my graduate school advisor. I was studying fishes that live on the abyssal plain at 4,000 meters, and I wanted to go through the scientific scuba diving course. I was already scuba certified, but I thought it would be real fun to go help some of my friends who work in the kelp forest on their projects and things like this. And the scientific diving course costs a few $100s to take, and they usually do it the week of spring break or something like that. And I went and I talked to my advisor and I said, yeah, I really think I should get this scientific diving certificate. And he just looked at me instantly and said, you can't dive to 4,000 meters, Drazen. You're not taking the class. And that was the end of that in my graduate school diving endeavors. I still ended up diving for my friends who were doing research in shallow water and had a great time. But yeah, it's not always required. And we've changed out the amount of tether, and we've got a still camera system on this vehicle. And so now that we're going down, they take a little extra weight than they think they'll need, and then they have to sort of figure out how to fine tune that buoyancy so that they really are maybe just a couple of pounds negative, just barely sinking. You want the vehicle to be as close to neutral as possible, just because it drive across the seafloor without having to be thrusting up all the time, right? Because every time you spin those propellers and push water down to force the ROV up, you kick up mud. So you could also be a little bit positive and floating, and then you could use your thrusters to push water up, and you could just not floating, not sinking. So it just takes a little fine tuning, which is what we're doing here. Once they get this set, then when we do our next dives for the cruise, they'll have a really good idea. They may only have to take out one bag on a dive or nothing at all, because they'll have a pretty good idea of what the buoyancy is. Buoyancy will be a little different when we get to 4,700 meters, because that much pressure, 470 atmospheres of pressure, will actually compress the foam flotation and change its buoyancy. So they'll end up doing this again probably when the first dive onto the abyssal plain. Yeah, so here we are just setting another ballast package down on the bottom. This is just cotton washcloth filled with metal pieces of scrap, so it'll all rust and disintegrate away. We make it as environmentally friendly as we can. The metal really just rusts away, and it's just cotton, so that's biodegradable as well. And this is just setting the trim or the buoyancy on the vehicle to try to make sure that we're neutrally buoyant. So we're at the bottom in about, and once we have sort of fine-tuned this buoyancy, then we'll be able to do some of the other tests, try to pick some things up, try to make sure the manipulator arms are working the way we want them to, use the slurp sampler to collect something off the seafloor. So you can see all these mud clouds. This is investing a little bit of time in the beginning to make sure that your buoyancy is right. Helps prevent kicking up a lot of mud, or at least as much mud all the time. Yep. Yeah, if you make a real mess on the seafloor, it can take 15 minutes to clear. It does, but it's mostly in terms of how much payload do they have for samples. So if, as you're going along during the dive, if you keep putting things into the basket and they're heavy, then at some point you got to come up. But these guys, things like that. That we do not. Science in general, we file permits to do work, for all kinds of different things. But this does not exceed a threshold for needing to do that in this case. The ROV drivers can feel. So they dropped the little brown pouch of shot of metal, and then we created that mud cloud. Once they go up a little bit, then they just stop those thrusters, and they just mud to clear out of the water. Um, and yeah, Jason, you're right here. The deeper you go, typically the finer the mud is, and really small grains of mud like clay take a long time to settle out. And so when you get really deep, mud clouds can stay in the water for a very long time, potentially days. Small ROV like this. So here it's not so bad. We're quite shallow, and actually there's a lot of sand on the bottom here. So the mud clouds aren't really that bad here. We've got a question that's talking about And so, for instance, the National Submergence Facility has an ROV called Jason that's been around now for 20 years or so, but many parts of it have been upgraded over time. It's not the same vehicle it was 20 years ago. But yeah, eventually these systems get retired and replaced by newer ones, and that lifespan is typically measured. Its ranges in something like 20 years, maybe 30 years or so. But it depends on the system and how many upgrades it goes through. Okay, so the guys are just waiting for this. Actually, they may not be. They may be going for core right now. No, they're going for a pouch of ballast. ROV, this is Computer Lab. ROV, this is Jeff in the computer lab. Do you guys read? Okay. Just skip it, Megan. It's all right. I'm gonna walk over there. communication side of communication. I can't hear the chatter between. Oh, I'm not casting blame at anybody. Yeah, I think that's actually what we. What's going on in there? Yeah, because I'm trying to figure out why is. Well, now I know because some of the old shot bags I think they were as much weight as they thought they were when they put them in. We didn't understand what was happening with the tether and the tensioning of the tether, and it's because we don't think so. Well, I have a microphone. I have a microphone. I can yeah. Well, I think then Testing. Okay. We're back on. Okay. Just to tell those who are tuning in here to the YouTube video a little bit about what's going on, we're just practicing taking some sediment cores, some mud cores. The bottom here is actually very sandy, which is why you see most of it falling out the bottom. But again, we're just practicing, make sure that all systems are working well for our work on the abyssal plain starting tomorrow. Okay, so what the pilots are now reaching for, that baseball is basically just a convenient handle over a metal stub for the manipulator arm. They can kind of grab it in any direction. What they're grabbing is the end of a hose can turn the vacuum on at different speeds to gently suck animals into a plastic container towards the back of the basket that you see periodically sliding in and out there. See what's going on because we're looking straight down the barrel of the slurp gun. And I think the pilots are looking around trying to find something interesting to practice on, but they also have other cameras that are more off to the side. And they can use multiple cameras to try to line up the end of that tube with something that they'll practice on here. So there you go. They push the end of the slurp gun in after they turn the vacuum pump on, and you can see the sediment rapidly move up the hose. Looks like they're going to experiment here. There's a little brown clump of what's probably just detritus or maybe a small stone. And the slurp gun is stowed. It actually can be kind of difficult. You'll notice that many of these actions are rather slow on the seafloor. That's because the pilots are trying to manipulate things in three-dimensional space, but they're looking at a flat screen just like you are. And so they have to sort of keep looking back and forth between different cameras at different angles to try to get an idea of what that three-dimensional space is that they're operating in. And it just is a little clumsy. The systems are rapidly going to move towards stereo cameras and virtual reality type goggles so that you